Uh, Unfortunately, Martin Novin, the executive director of the Maryland State Retirement and Pension System, called Wanda early this morning to say that he wouldn't be able to be here today because of illness. So we certainly wish Martin a speedy recovery. That will just give everybody else longer to talk and longer to answer questions. So hopefully they will have a lot of back and forth conversation going on today. The first thing I would like to do is to introduce our new legislative chair, Tom Slater. And I think Tom is here now. So Tom, I'm going to turn the microphone over to you and you can introduce yourself as our new chair. Tom.
Thank you, Carla. I appreciate that. And I'm pleased to see that my good friend Brit Kirwan is on this call already. So we're looking forward to hearing. I know you'll really be informed when you hear his comments on the Blueprint for Maryland School Improvement Update. I was informed by Wanda about 20 minutes ago that since we didn't have Martin here, that I was going to have to filibuster a little bit and fill in some time, but I don't think I need to do that at this point. I did prepare some things to say, but I think it's more important to get on with the program and hear from Brit. Just a little bit about myself. I've been the committee chair since last June, and I want to thank Fred Evans. I don't know if Fred's on the call or not, but Fred served in this capacity, and he was a terrific chair of the legislative committee. I'm a retired teacher from Frederick County. I taught for 16 years and then taught at the community college level for about 20 years. And in the process, went to law school, and I just retired 2 weeks ago after 42 years of practicing law. And so I look forward. I've always been interested in government and politics, so it's been fun to serve on the legislative committee, and I look forward to being your chair. But I don't want to get in the way of hearing from Brit, so I'll stop at that point.
Thank you very much, Tom. We're happy that you're able to be with us today, and so happy that you have become the chair of our committee. I would like now to have our moderators share a video. Our Senate President, Bill Ferguson, was not able to be with us today, but he did send a video. So I'd like to share that with you now.
Do you see the video?
Not right now. We did for a second.
Okay, here we go. We're gonna get it. There we go. Okay.
There
you see it now. Okay.
Hello, and thank you for inviting me to share a few words with you today. I'm deeply appreciative of the work that the Maryland Retired School Personnel Association does to engage in our political and legislative processes. Your work helps to ensure that those of us in the General Assembly protect the interests of our incredible retirees who have devoted their life's work to our state's children. For those of you who may not know me, I'm Bill Ferguson, and I have the honor of serving as the President of the Senate of Maryland. In addition to representing the 46th Legislative District in Baltimore City, my role as presiding officer is to support each of our senators and their constituents. Before running for the Maryland Senate, I also had the honor of teaching U.S. history and government to high schoolers in Baltimore City's public schools. That experience was foundational to my drive to run for office to ensure our teachers, school staff, students, and families are all being adequately supported by the state. The state of Maryland's commitment to supporting our incredible school employees doesn't end when you retire. We must continue providing predictable benefits to those who have empowered the next generation of Marylanders. Your engagement in our legislative process today is absolutely critical. I hope you will stay in touch as the General Assembly continues making progress on behalf of our state's residents and passes a budget that reflects our commitment to school retirees. Thank you again for this opportunity to join you today and for all that you do to advocate for your fellow Marylanders.
Thank you for sharing that. It's good to know that we have a friend in the state Senate. Because, as I said, that Martin Novin is unable to be with us today, I'm going to now ask our legislative aide for MRSPA, Virginia Crespo, to share just a little bit about how our legislative committee works. Virginia and I go way, way back. We taught together 20-some years ago at Bresnaham High School in Anne Arundel County, and I knew then that she was a person who knew just about everything there was to know about the state legislature. So it's my pleasure to introduce an old friend, Virginia Crespo.
Thank you, Carla. I only wish I could live up to that. I'm not going to go into full detail right now because since Dr. Kirwan is present, but I would like to say that I believe you have received our priorities, and this is what we start with every year. Our priorities. The committee meets in August to review them, to see if we need to take anything off, add anything to it. And this is the basis of what we do. After that, then when I look at the legislative bills that are coming down, we only look and review the ones that fit in some way to our legislative priorities. And I want to say that the first one of those, top of the list, always is our pension, protecting our pension. It's been such a relief the last couple of years to know that we don't have a major battle with the legislature to protect our pension. We are finally on the road to where it should be, which is to say 80% funded. That percentage is based on accepted practices across the country. And if Dr. Novin were here, I believe that he would tell us that we're very close to achieving that 80%. Having a stock market that's kind of going very high these days, that's even more likely. But we are not dependent on the stock market for our solvency. I would like to say that the issues in the legislature this year, of course, budget is always primary, and we will be hear from a speaker from the budget department about that. Once again, we're dealing with deficits instead of surpluses with the end of the pandemic and the pandemic funding coming from the federal government. But I will not speak to that right now. The other issues that are big for the legislature this year have to do with juvenile justice. They're looking for legislation that would provide more accountability, not only for the juveniles, but for the whole system, because there are some failures in the system. And these failures are failures to the juveniles who are part of it, unfortunately. Housing, transportation, mental health. These are the kinds of things that the legislature has set up as priorities this year. So we are looking at them in detail. And Carla, if you think that it might be appropriate, I can go into detail about how we operate later in the agenda.
That would be good.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much, Virginia. Okay, our next speaker is present. I saw him ready when we first started our meeting, so I'm not going to delay any longer. We're very lucky and honored today to have with us Dr. William Brit Kirwan, who is the Vice Chair, Accountability and Implementation Board of the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. Dr. Kirwan has had a long and varied career in education. In fact, I just learned in my reading that it actually began in 1963 when he became an assistant instructor in mathematics at Rutgers. Where has he been since then? Well, he is Chancellor Emeritus of the University System of Maryland. He is a nationally recognized authority on critical issues facing higher education. He served as Chancellor of the University of Maryland System, President of Ohio State University, and President of the University of Maryland at College Park. Prior to his presidency, he was a member of the University of Maryland Mathematics faculty for 24 years. Dr. Kirwan received his bachelor's degree in mathematics from the University of Kentucky in 1960, and his master's and doctoral degrees in mathematics from Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey in 1962 and 1964, respectively. He is the recipient of honorary doctorate degrees from the University of Kentucky, the Ohio State University, and the Johns Hopkins University. Dr. Kirwan served as chair of the Commission on Innovation and Excellence in Education from 2016 through 2019, which made recommendations that are encapsulated in legislation known collectively as the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. Now, you notice when I introduced him, I said Dr. William Brit Kirwan, and you may be wondering, where did the Brit come from? Well, in my reading, I learned that his middle name is English, and therefore we know him as Dr. William Brit Kirwan. And so it is my honor and privilege to give you Dr. Kirwan.
Well, wow, what a wonderful introduction. Thank you so very much. I'm very honored and pleased to be here. And, I'm actually eligible to be a member of this group since I was a state employee for decades. And just want to express my appreciation for the work that you do, the support that you give to so many important issues. And I too have a vested interest in the retirement fund. So I'm glad to know that that's a top priority for this group. I do want to start by recognizing Tom Slater, with whom I had the pleasure of working for, I think, 8 years when he was on the Board of Regents. Tom was such a tremendous member of the Board of Regents, providing guidance to me, helping me keep straight and do things as well as could be done. And I was just so appreciative of his very direct, wise guidance over those years, but also I would say even more the warmth of his friendship. And so it's a real pleasure to see him on this in this group, and now the chair of your legislative group. I have some slides, if I might. I'm going to try to share my screen. Do I have authority to share?
Yes, everyone should have authority to share, but especially you.
Oh. Okay, well, let's see if I can get this up on my screen. I'm not a whiz bang at this technology, but let's see if I go here. Open system. Here we go. I think I'm almost there. Okay. So, all right, let me see if I can get this into slideshow modality. Hide sidebars. Okay, here we go. So this is, we're here to
We're
talk.
not seeing your
Oh, you're
screen.
not? Okay, let me try once
I
more.
don't think. I'm not.
Yeah, you probably aren't. So let me try once more to get the shared screen.
So if you click on the green button down there.
Yeah, and it says open system preferences, allow Zoom to share. And
You should be able to select which screen you want to share.
Yeah.
Brit, if you're like me, you need your 10-year-old granddaughter or something.
Exactly. Thought I had this set up so you could see it, but I've got the screen I want to share up, but let's see. No, that's not doing it. Share screen. So, okay, I'll try one more time and then we'll just abandon this if it doesn't work. So I'm going to, somebody who's a whiz bang at this, I hit share screen
Mm-hmm.
and then,
Then it should come up with a list of your screens and you can
right.
select which one.
And I can touch the desktop, which is, it's on the desktop. So I'll click that and I open that and it comes up for me, but you don't see it.
You have to go into your information, Dr. Kerwin. Your document should already be up.
Yeah, it is. And it says desktop and dock. So
You don't have it
now
open yet.
that won't be it. Okay. So,
Can you email your file to one of us?
Yeah.
So we can put it up?
oh, that's a good idea. Let me try that. So I'm going to email, and I'll get started, but I will go ahead and email this.
Send
And
it
I
to
should email it.
H Rothert, ROTHERT.
Wait, just one second.
Oh, sorry. Heidi, take it away.
I can put it in the chat too
Yeah.
if that would be easier. I don't know if you can see
Okay.
the chat.
Okay. So I'm even having trouble doing that. File, port, export. Oh, wait, share. There we go. All right, I'm going to email it to, give me the address again, please.
Yep. HROTHERT@MRSPA.org. I just put it up on the chat so everybody can see it. So you should be able to see it on the chat as well.
Okay, so it's going to you.
Okay.
All right, it went. So let me get started, and when we get it, it's fine. Just to what I wanted to do today was to talk about very briefly the blueprint, its 5 pillars, what was expected of the blueprint last year and what was accomplished, how we are measuring success with the blueprint, what the expectations are, and then what the expectations are for the blueprint in the coming year. Let me just give a word of background. As was mentioned in the introduction, I was appointed to chair the Commission on Innovation and Excellence in Education by Governor Hogan and the General Assembly. And it's important to know what the charge to the commission was. It wasn't just to study our pre-K system and make recommendations to improve it. It was to make recommendations so that our system would perform as well as any system in the world. Now, if you look at national data, we at that time were performing more or less in the middle of the pack in the country, and our country was performing more or less at the middle of the pack of the industrialized nations. So, excuse me, got a very bad cold. This was a very daunting charge. And we went about this by doing a very deep dive into the elements of the high-performing school systems around the world, studying in great depth. What are their policies? What are their practices? Why are they so good? And then we had to take the basic elements that we identified and adapt them to the Maryland context. And that became our recommendation for the General Assembly and the governor, which we completed as was said, in 2019. Our recommendations were very comprehensive and extensive, and the implementation time period for the blueprint is actually 10 years because it calls for such dramatic and changes in the way we have provided education for our children. And so this was not something that could be done quickly. It was determined that to fully implement all these recommendations and get the funding in place, it would take a 10-year period. And the amount of money required was very substantial. By the end of that 10-year period, in order to do all of these things, we would be spending something like $4.3 billion more on education than we would otherwise have been spending. The vast majority of that money was to come from the state, and various revenue sources were developed to help fund that. So these recommendations went forward to the General Assembly. Now, the recommendations fall into five distinct groupings.
Dr. Kirwan, I
yes.
do have it if you would like for me to share now.
Sure, please. So if I go to back to Zoom, okay, if you could, all right, you want to move forward? Can I do it? I guess I can.
Hang on. It looks like, can you see the power?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
If you can move it forward, I think
Yes, let
3
me.
slides.
Okay. Sorry. Give me. Okay. Sorry, I just have to move things around on my desktop.
Okay. So
All
there,
right,
go
there?
back one right here. Yes, that's perfect. Okay. So the elements of this comprehensive plan, there are these 5 pillars. One is early childhood education. What we learned is that these high-performing systems make a substantial investment in early childhood education. And so you will see that that's a very significant piece of the blueprint. It provides full day, high quality preschool for free for all low income 4-year-olds and 3-year-olds. And it also includes an expansion of what we call the Patty and Judy centers around the state that help low-income families in the early years of child rearing. The second pillar is to really invest in the quality of our teaching force. In these high-performing countries, teaching is considered a high-status profession. Teachers are thought of in the same breath as lawyers and architects and engineers. And it's that is the case because of the rigor of their training and their compensation. And so there's a big investment in raising the standards of our teacher preparation programs, and then providing appropriate compensation so that we can get more of the best and brightest into our teaching force. The third pillar is a really quite, I think, important in many ways. It's the heart of the blueprint, and it is that we want to get all kids by the end of the 10th grade ready and able to pursue college level work while they're still in high school, or participate in a career and technical education pathway leading to a rigorous credential in a high-paying profession that has career options for the individuals. Then the fourth pillar is to invest much more substantially in schools serving high concentrations of poverty. We learned on the commission that Maryland, despite its reputation as a liberal state, was actually regressive in its funding of education. That is, giving more money to schools serving high income families than it did to schools serving low income families. And so we changed the funding formula to add substantial, not taking away from the schools serving high income families, but investing many more dollars in schools serving low income families. And then finally, the fifth pillar is to have accountability. You know, it's fine to talk about all these improvements and make all this investment of money, but the public needs to feel that this investment is going to produce results we all want to see. And so since this program was so comprehensive, it involves MSDE, the State Department of Education. It involves higher education. It involves the Governor's Workforce Investment Board. There had to be an entity that was overarching all these state departments, state entities, to provide accountability and oversight, that to see that the recommendations of the blueprint were faithfully implemented and that they were producing the results. So the Accountability and Implementation Board, chaired by Ike Leggett, former county executive of Montgomery County, has quite substantial authority. It can, if a school or a school district is not faithfully implementing the recommendations, the AIB can withhold funds from that school and district until they actually get their implementation right. And once the plans have been implemented, then the Accountability and Implementation Board has the authority to withhold funds if a school isn't getting the kinds of results we want to see, and can bring in teams of experts to work with that school to elevate its performance for its students. So this is as I say, a very comprehensive change in higher education, which captures all the elements of the high-performing systems around the world. And I'm really quite optimistic that this is going to lead to a very significant change in the quality of education in Maryland. So as you all probably know, the recommendation from the commission I chaired was sent to the General Assembly. They passed a bill in 2021 when we were entering the period of COVID. They adjourned. At the end of they had to adjourn early, so they left town. The governor later vetoed the bill. He thought the cost was too high. But then the next year, when the General Assembly came back, they overrode the bill veto, and so the bill came into effect, and we were off and running. Now, we've had a couple of missteps at the start. Governor Hogan, who was not particularly supportive of the bill at the end, even though he got the process started, did not appoint the AIB board, which was the kickoff of the blueprint, in a timely fashion. And when he did appoint it, he didn't appropriate any money for it. And so we almost lost a year, the first year of the blueprint. And then the State Department of Education, the Board of Education, appointed a superintendent who seemed to be a highly energetic, knowledgeable individual to lead to play a critical role in the implementation of the blueprint. But for a variety of reasons, that appointment didn't work out. And so we lost ground once again. But the state is now brought into that position a woman by the name of Dr. Carrie Wright, who has gained great fame. She's a Marylander. She worked in Montgomery County as a deputy superintendent, but she became the superintendent in Mississippi And while she was the superintendent there, Mississippi's reading scores went from the bottom in the country to the 20th place in the nation, in a very poor state that she just made dramatic progress. And so she retired and she came back to Maryland. And so I've said the gods were looking out for us because she was there, was retired from her position. The state board has brought her on as the interim superintendent. She's doing a phenomenal job, working so closely and well with the AIB. And we are all very optimistic that, I personally am hopeful she will get the job permanently, but she's just the kind of leader we need to have the blueprint be successful. So if we could move now to the next slide, and I do want to leave, how much time do we have? I want to leave some time for questions, Madam Chair. You're on mute, I think. How much more time do we have?
You have approximately a half an hour.
Okay, good. So what has happened? So there are so many strategies and initiatives involved in the blueprint. It's just a massive number of things that we're changing. And so here's a list of things that have been accomplished over the first 2 years of the blueprint. The AIB has created what I would call the master plan, the overarching comprehensive implementation plan that all the LEAs must follow in developing their individual plans. And the LEAs have now submitted their first. Each year, they're going to have to submit and get approved by the AIB their implementation plans for that year, and they've done that, and those have been approved by the AIB. I mentioned the college and career readiness standard. That's what we're aiming all of our a new standard for college and career readiness that would apply. Would be the test at the end of the 10th grade to see if our students are ready to start college level work or the career and technical education pathway. And a lot of work has been done on that, and the state board has recently approved an initial college and career ready standard, but that will be adjusted as we go forward. We have expert review teams out in all the districts studying to see if the LEAs are implementing their plans as proposed. We have all the LEAs have created an MOU with private pre-K providers. I mentioned how important this preschool initiative is, that we want to have all kids come to kindergarten ready to learn, and the preschool is the means by which that will occur. And so we don't have enough space in our schools for all of these preschools to be in public school buildings, and so we have to rely on existing private providers to meet the standards of the blueprint with their preschool programs, and then they would be funded at the appropriate level for public school, low-income students who were in their preschool. So we have reached agreement with the private providers, but this, I must say, remains a challenge. Not all the private providers want to participate in the program, and we are working with the private providers to create the right environment so that we will have adequate numbers of private providers to make all of this work as we intended. I think we can go to the next slide. Okay. I think maybe you skipped over one. Yes, yes, year two. Okay, six metrics. Yeah. Oh, yes, the State Board of Education and the Professional Development Standards of the Education Board have changed the COMAR regulations and to elevate the certification for teacher preparation. Remember, a major part of the blueprint is to increase the standards for teacher certification, coupled with better training, higher standards, but more compensation. And that has been done by the State Board and the Professional Standards Board. We have you can see several of the other steps that have been taken in the slide. MSDE has hired a state national board certification coordinator. That may be a term that is not familiar to a lot of you. There is a national certification of teaching called the National Board Certification. It's a rather high standard. I guess the analogy I would have is it's like the state bar exam, or like an accounting. Accountants have to meet a national standard in order to be certified to do certain levels of accounting work. Well, there is a similar thing in teacher education. It's called National Board for Certification. And the commission did a lot of study. A number of states have implemented policies to set the expectation that all teachers would become National Board certified. And the evidence is overwhelming that the National Board certification definitely improves the teacher's performance with children. And so part of the blueprint is a heavy emphasis on getting more and more teachers to be national board certification. And that is now well underway. We have developed a career counseling MOU between the local workforce development boards, the LEAs, and the community colleges. This is really critically important because there's an expectation that a large number of students in the future are going to pursue a career and technical education pathway. This will be the pathway leading to a certification in a high-paying technical service field. It might be data processing, it might be coding, it might be electrician, it might be whatever, plumbing, whatever. But so this agreement is going to enable the schools to work with the local workforce development boards in order to get internships for these kids that are pursuing this pathway. Incidentally, the projection is that some 40% of our high school students will follow this pathway. And from all the data I've ever read, our nation badly needs these highly skilled individuals. And believe me, the many of these professions, as I'm sure you're all aware, pay very good salaries right out of school. Okay, let's move to the next slide. So success metrics. Some of the things that have happened. Over 700 Maryland public school teachers earned National Board certification just last year. That's a terrific number. And as I say, this is not an easy thing to achieve, but it shows that the incentives we've provided for to become National Board certified are working. More and more teachers are following that pathway. We have over 3,100 NBC certified teachers in Maryland now. We have a new middle and high school career counseling to help kids. These counseling centers in middle schools and high schools are helping kids get into the right curriculum pathways to pursue vocations that they are interested in, and to be sure they get into the right courses. There wasn't this kind of counseling in the past, and I think this is a very positive step. We've already got close to 24,000 students enrolled in our publicly funded preschool programs, and that number is going to ramp up rapidly. The Patty and Judy Centers, I don't know how many of you are familiar with them, but they are phenomenal resources. The Patty Centers work with parents in low-income districts for on both prenatal and postnatal education about nutrition, child rearing. So starting with kids just at the time of birth. And there's been all sorts of research shown that brain development is affected so greatly by the first 2 or 3 years of life. And that is determined by how young the nutrition and how young children are raised from the moment of birth. That impacts their brain development so significantly. And so we're going to have these Patty Centers across the state. They'll be phased in over time. We're up to 35 now. We have 86 Judy Centers. They work with kids from 3 to 5 and families to help. We provide counseling, support for finding appropriate healthcare services, tutoring, et cetera, and really very important research sources for our young children in the state. And the 99 additional community schools opened in fiscal year 24. Community schools are the vehicle by which we are investing more money in schools serving low-income families. I mentioned early on that one of the problems in the past in Maryland is we were underfunding schools serving low-income families. And so the concept of a community school is that they get extra money to bring in counselors, tutors, after-school academic program. They have a coordinator who can direct families in the community to social services in the region that can provide them with the resources they need. Community schools have proven to be enormously successful, and we now have 99 additional community schools in fiscal year 24, and these will continue to ramp up as we phase in the blueprint. Next slide, please. Okay, so this coming year, what is going to what will be in the offering for this coming year? As I mentioned, the pre-K is free for all families at 300%. Family of 4, 300% of the poverty rate in the country, and so they go free. There is a sliding scale up to 600%. So families between 300 and 600% pay something, but there's as I say, a sliding scale up to 600% of the federal poverty level. So that has been that's will be implemented in this coming year. The LEAs will begin the implementation of their career ladders for teachers. Just a word about this because it's really important. As I said, we want to better prepare teachers, better compensate them, but we want teachers to have a chance to advance over their career, have a sense that they can advance over their career to higher levels of income based on their performance. So there's a merit-based career ladder with 5 steps so that high-quality teachers don't necessarily go into administration or leave teaching to earn the kind of income their skill and talent warrants. And so these career ladders are now being built into all of our LEAs to better support our teachers. We found that our teacher salaries were not what they should be in comparison to states near us. So there was a 10% salary increase for all teachers phased in over from FY19 through FY24. We have minimum school funding requirement reports begin in 7/1/24. That means that there's a principle that the blueprint has established that dollars must follow the kids. So the vast majority of funding that goes to the LEA based on the per student formulas must follow the children to the school they're in and not be held centrally. So that's what the minimum school funding requirement reports to ensure that that's actually happening. The LEAs will have to update their implementation plans, which will come to the AIB and MSDE in the coming months of this year. And then finally, we have a outcomes measures work group. How are we going to measure that we are making success? All this talk is wonderful. It sounds good. We've invested money. Things are happening. How do we know we're getting the outcomes we want? So the AIB has established an outcomes measures work group that's going to set benchmarks to here's where we want to get. We want to get to a place where Maryland schools rank near the top in as good as any in the world and near the top in the US. And so what are the benchmarks that will show we're making progress towards those goals? This is really important because it will give the public confidence that the blueprint is having its intended effect. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, for the coming year, I want to talk about I'm about done with my slides. I want to talk just a moment about literacy and the science of reading. I'm going to give you two headlines that I read recently that seem disconnected, seem very troubling in a way. The first is good news. Maryland is rated, it was found to have the highest average per capita family income in the US. So in some sense, we are the wealthiest state in the union by that measure. Then another headline I read was there's a national assessment of education progress called the NAEP exam. And the federal government requires this, and every state must measure the reading and math levels of its children at the 4th and 8th grade. And this is the same test given in all the states. And it's a way to see where does your state sit in relation to the other states in the union. And when the blueprint started, we were at when the blueprint started, when the commission started, we were in the middle of the pack. In math and reading, we were 25, 26, 27, something like that. The most recent NAEP scores had Maryland ranked 40th. That's right, 40th in 4th grade reading, 43rd in 4th grade math. That's abominable. Here we are, a wealthy state, and our kids are performing at that level. So the blueprint has come along at the perfect moment to reverse this very troubling trend, a downward trend we've had in our students' performance. So as we've delved into this, we've found that there have been in our country what we might call reading wars on literacy. There's something called the science of reading, which is very evidence-based, and starts with phonics so that kids can learn to read words by sounding them out, which is an established form of reading. There's a second strategy called whole language, where students don't learn phonics. They learn to read by trying to guess words given the context of what they are reading. And the education world has been divided into these two camps: the whole language and the science of reading. Well, there's been some recent very impressive studies of which is more effective. And the science of reading has won hands down. It is clearly the strategy that does the best job of teaching young people to read. And that's the strategy that Carrie Wright used in Mississippi that had produced these dramatic works. So we found that in Maryland, we have a mixed bag. Some LEAs are using whole language, some are using science of reading. And unfortunately, some of our colleges of preparation are teaching teachers in whole language. Others are teaching them in the science of reading. And so the AIB and the MSD have come together and said, stop. From now on, it's going to be science of reading. Every LEA must use the science of reading strategies and science of reading curriculum. You have to stop whole language, and teacher preparation programs have to prepare all teachers to get certified in science of reading. And so the state board just produced, and maybe some of you saw it, a proclamation declaring this with AIB support, and even set a goal that in 4 years, Maryland will be in the top 10 in literacy. And this would be great news for our state, and it would show the power of the blueprint. Now, I'm a mathematician, and so I worry a lot about mathematics, but even as a mathematician, let me tell you, literacy is the starting point. You can't learn mathematics if you can't read. And so we're starting with the literacy, but then we're going to have a similar implementation of the most effective teaching and learning strategies in mathematics to follow up this effort on literacy. So we've created a teams that are now out in the LAs that are teams of experts that are analyzing their literacy plans to see how well they're aligned with the science of reading. And they're going to be reporting back to MSDE and AIB, and their plans won't be approved unless we are convinced that they are meeting the standards of the science of reading. I just want to close by, you see several other bullets here where MSDE and AIB are working so well together in many areas. AIB is created a program to send strategic facilitators out to the LAAs to help them work with the next iteration of their implementation plans. And we're also sending some technical experts out to help the LAs develop their career ladder for teachers, which will be required in this year's report. So my assessment is that we got off to a slow start. We are making a lot of progress. We have plenty of challenges. This kind of change is not easy. There'll be naysayers along the way. What I think is so vitally, so important, so critical, is that we have the will and the persistence to move forward with this plan. It will produce the results, because it does everywhere these strategies have been implemented. It will produce results, and we need to make whatever we need to change the blueprint based on evidence, wherever we need to make some modifications, and that will surely occur. You couldn't possibly write a 10-year plan that doesn't need some modifications along the way, but we want to modify that based on evidence that the change is necessary and will improve the implementation. So I feel with the leadership of the MSDE, with Carrie Wright in place, I have great confidence that we're going to continue to see progress with the blueprint and get to the point where we will all be bursting with pride over the quality of the education system of Maryland. And you know, this is so important. I mean, when you think about what is the single most important thing we can do to have a bright future for the economy and living conditions in Maryland, and it's to have an educated population. You know, when you have an educated population, you have lower incarceration rates. You have lower Medicaid payments. You have higher incomes. That's what happens when you have a well-educated population, and that's where we are headed for. That's where we're headed in the state with the blueprint. And then finally, I will say I'm very pleased to note that Governor Moore's budget includes full funding for the blueprint in 2025. And I can't tell you how important it has been to have the strong General Assembly support for the blueprint. And I think there's a very important point to keep in mind here is that on the commission I chaired, there were 4 members from the General Assembly and 4 members from the Senate. They were on the commission. So that's 8 out of about 22 members. And it turns out that one of those members from the Senate is now president of the Senate, Bill Ferguson. And one of those members from the House was Adrian Jones, now Speaker of the House. So the blueprint isn't a strategy given to the General Assembly. This is their plan. This is their plan. So they are invested in this, and that gives me great hope that we're going to see this through to the end. So with that, I will stop my comments and be happy to respond to any questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kirwan. I know that for myself, seeing something concrete like this really helps me to better understand the importance of the blueprint. Now, we have 54 people online right now, and I'm sure there's some questions. And I'm going to ask Wanda and Heidi to help me identify people who have questions. If you would like to ask Dr. Kirwan a question, I'm going to give him about 10 minutes. Down either at the bottom or the top of your screen, there's a little raise hand icon. I'd like you to click on that, and then we will be on the lookout for who has their hand up. As soon as I get my gallery up there. I see Edie Picken has her hand up, so I'll start with Edie.
Good morning, Dr. Kirwan.
Good
I hope
morning.
you can hear me okay. So I think there are a couple questions that I have for you, actually. And I think the first one has to do, obviously, with the funding. When you say that Governor Moore has included in his budget for 25 full funding of the blueprint,
right,
where is that money coming from? Because I think there are a lot of people that are concerned, obviously, statewide, because this is and I understand it's a very expensive plan. I think it costs over, I think it costs something over $9 billion or something like that.
No, it's not. It's 4.
That's an increase of 4.3, right? But isn't it, isn't the total like about 9? If you're increasing by that, doesn't it take it up to
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, it's over $9 billion.
Yeah.
Where is that money coming from? I think that's a big question.
Well, at the state level, the money is coming from some special funds that were created. There was the gambling contributes a significant amount of the funding. Sports betting contributes a significant amount of funding. Almost all of the incremental funding for the blueprint comes from what we call special funds, not the general fund.
Okay.
So it is not the state portion of this is not a burden let me be clear about this. Up through fiscal 28,
Mhm.
the funding that is required comes from the special revenue sources that are not part of the general fund. Now, after 28,
Mhm.
there will be a requirement for additional general funds, and that's going to be an issue. The general public is going to have to decide, and the General Assembly and the governor are going to decide: do we want to fully fund the blueprint
Mhm.
over these last 4 or 5 years of implementation? And I think that my own opinion is, if we can show the kind of progress that I think we can, there might be a willingness to provide that funding. I will say that lots of people, talking about the funding, that's a very important question, but it is also interesting to consider how does Maryland compare with other states in its investment in education? So if you look at the per pupil state investment from state and local investment, Maryland ranks in the nation 18th.
Mhm.
So there's 17 states that are providing higher levels of funding for their children. And yet, as we know, by some measures, Maryland is the wealthiest state. So
Well-
I would say that there is margin for Maryland to increase its investment, but I certainly, if the blueprint isn't producing results, I can well understand why many people would be opposed to any further investment in the blueprint.
Right, because I know that in the initial information that I got when I was still working, I've only been retired a little over a year, that, how it's all scripted out with administrators now going back into the classroom portions and things like that. That's a New England model. And yeah, that's a school system where you have like a high school, a couple of junior highs or middle schools, and just a few elementary schools feeding into these same schools. Where here we've got systems of schools, which are hundreds of schools. And so now, you're looking at property taxes, and I can talk about that in Vermont because that's why I got out of Vermont. It was like, you got to be kidding me. And I think that's the big fear here. If you're looking at a property tax bill and you're paying X amount, and I'll just use some stupid little numbers. Let's say you're paying $4,000 for your property taxes, but the school tax is like $10,000. I mean, it's crazy, because that's exactly why I got out of there. And I only had a second home, but I sold it because I said, I can't afford that. And if that happens in Maryland, that's going to be a problem.
Yeah. Well, if you break down the who's paying what for the blueprint, the cost of the blueprint, over 80% of the cost of the blueprint, the incremental cost. I'm not talking about the floor level that we're building on with the blueprint. 80% of over 80% of the funding for the blueprint comes from the state, not the locals. And so with the exception of maybe 4 or 5 jurisdictions, I think, in the state, the amount of money required from that jurisdiction, if these jurisdictions continue to increase funding for pre-K through 12 at the rate they have in past years, they will fully fund their commitment to the blueprint. Now, there are 3 or 4 jurisdictions where that's not the case, and that's an issue. I readily admit that. That's going to require some further thinking and thought how those LEAs are going to be able to meet their commitment, but that's not an issue at the immediately, but it will be in a year or so. And there's going to have to be some thought, and fortunately, people are giving a lot of thought to this question, and there's going to likely be some adjustments in how these 4 or 5, maybe 6 jurisdictions will be able to meet their commitment to the blueprint.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Well, we have
So
time for,
Oh,
we have
go
time
ahead.
for one more question, and Carol Howard is the other person I first saw with their hand up. So Carol, real quick question that doesn't have to do with funding.
Oh, okay. Well, it was about funding because was asking about all of the continued support for the boost funding. And I know it's coming back again, but okay.
Dr. Kirwan, do you want to answer that or?
Yeah, if she could, just explain a little bit better with the question.
There are it's been a long time that there's been lots of push for vouchers and other kinds of things to support families to not be in the public schools. And I saw that there's going to be legislation again this year in Maryland about that funding, and that funding siphons away from the funding for public schools. And was just curious as to how we can continue to fight that with the cost of the blueprint.
Yeah, that's a very good question. It's not really, I mean, that's a question the General Assembly is going to have to wrestle with. That's sort of not a blueprint question, but it would impact the blueprint if this funding was increased significantly. You know, my hope is that as we move forward, people are going to see the dramatic improvement in our public schools. When we see that our literacy scores are rising from 40th to 10th, assuming we can get there, more and more, you know, this issue of not going to a public school will diminish the desire to do so. But I don't, you know, this is, how shall I say, above my pay grade. I can't answer the question of whether the General Assembly will decide to put money in for that. Quite frankly, you know, this is just one person speaking. I rather doubt it, given the demands on money this year with deficits, et cetera. I would be surprised if that happened, but again, that's a matter for the General Assembly.
Robert, absolute last question.
Years ago, if you recall, under No Child Left Behind,
yes,
focused on reading and math, and social studies and science kind of took a hit back then. Are we going in that same direction again?
Where social science took a hit?
Social studies and science took a hit.
Yeah.
Well, in fact, social studies teachers were asked to even teach reading at that point.
Right, right. Well, I don't think so. You know, if anything, I think certain areas of social science are being deemed as very important in today's society. I mean, child development, career counseling, all of these are just two areas of many that have really risen to the risen in people's consciousness as essential. So, and certainly science, not the physical, the hard sciences, as we sometimes call them. I certainly don't see any diminishment in the emphasis and priority for those areas.
But I'm talking more about history and geography. We're taking a lot of criticisms like kids
okay.
Civics.
Yeah.
We don't know about government anymore.
Right. I share your concern about those areas of social science. You know, it's the times certainly call for people to be much better informed on these issues of history. The old phrase, "Those who forget history are deemed to repeat it," as we know. So one of the things that I think is a guard against that is that a requirement of the blueprint is that our curriculum must be periodically benchmarked against high-performing curricula worldwide. And I don't see any I don't think when you look at some of these high performing systems around the world that you've seen that kind of diminishment in the areas of social sciences you were discussing. So I think that in a way, the blueprint is a protection against that.
Let me add something to that. The Board of Regents in 2018, I think, adopted a policy that the universities covered by the Board of Regents, which is all the state universities, but Morgan and St. Mary's, that they implement a program to ensure that the teaching of American history and government be supplemented or implemented to a greater degree in each of the colleges and universities in the state of Maryland. Now, that was in 2018. I don't know what's happened since then, but there is a plan that was implemented as a result of a task force that the Board of Regents had. So hopefully that will make that, the idea is to have every college graduate competent in their own history and government.
And Tom, let me just add, I know who was a stalwart in that effort. It would have been one, one Tom Slater.
Well, thank you, Tom, for sharing that. And Dr. Kirwan, thank you so much for joining with us today.
Well, I've enjoyed it very much. I hope this was helpful.
Now, I understand that you are eligible for membership in MRSPA.
Yes.
But you're not a member. We will have to take care of that, sir.
Okay. All right. Well, you all
we
do
welcome you. Thank you again.
Great work. And it's been a joy to be with you this morning. And thank you for all of your interest and the efforts you're making on behalf of our state.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Good day.
Good day. And as we take a look at our agenda now, we're going to move to a representative from AARP. The AARP Maryland legislative priorities will be shared by Tammy Bresnaham. Now, Tammy is not a stranger to MRSPA. She has attended many of our presentations. She is the Director of Advocacy for AARP Maryland. She has over 25 years experience in Maryland state government, specifically in health and social service programs. In 2011, she joined the staff of AARP Maryland and has represented AARP Maryland before the Maryland General Assembly, state, federal, and local governments, advocating for programs and services for Marylanders 50 plus. She has an extensive background in caregiving, long-term care, retirement security, Social Security, and Medicare. She has a Bachelor of Science degree from Salisbury University in Political Science. And so, Tammy, we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much, Miss Duls. I really appreciate that. And it's good to be with MRSPA and to hear Dr. Kirwan's blueprint. I have a 9-year-old grandson and an 18-month-old granddaughter, and they're in the Severn Park feeder system. So we're looking for big things. Anyway, I am a proud public school graduate, and I know Virginia Crespo gets tired of hearing this, but I think I date you, Ms. Duls. I've known Virginia since 1976, and if my math from Ms. Schlupner holds me correctly, that's about 48 years we go back. She taught me social studies, and I credit her at Northeast High School for everything that I have become. And I am the #1 advocate in the country. We had more advocacy wins in this little state of Maryland than they had in any other state. So we're very proud of that, and I couldn't have done it without Virginia. With that said, during the 90-day legislative session, our efforts will focus on, and you touched a bit on those, caregiving, empowering Marylanders to choose how they age, fighting to lower prescription drugs, which you'll hear another presentation on, affordable housing, retirement security. And I'm just going to go over about 5 bills that we're working on this year. And the first one is, and feel free to stretch and, yawn. I won't take it personally. I know that this has been, it's going to be a long morning for you all. The first bill is we believe that will support family caregivers. It's called the Family Income Tax Caregiver Tax Credit. It's House Bill 32, Senate Bill 202. And basically what it does, it gives a tax credit to those persons who are providing care, family care, not paid care, to a loved one over the age of 18. This bill has been in a couple of times. We're working with the Senate and the House sponsor, Senator Vincent and Delegate Harrison. And Virginia has come in support, so we really appreciate that. We think that this will be a small token. While the fiscal note is kind of high because it will allow a tax credit if up to $5,000, we are hoping that that is a figure that the General Assembly will work with us and to pass something that says caregivers are important. They recognize the work that they're doing. There are over 790,000 family caregivers in the state. They often spend over $7,200 a year when providing care to a loved one. And, you know, at any given time, you get that phone call from your nephew that says your sister had a stroke on December the 20th, and now everybody's life is in a cluster. We got to make sure she has dinner. We need to make sure that she's taken to her appointments. We need to make sure that she has 24-hour care because that first 30 days is really, really tough. So we're hoping that the General Assembly will see its ways and do something for family caregivers for the first time ever. We're also concerned about long-term care. And why are we concerned about residential service agencies? Those are the people that come into your house when you don't have a family caregiver. And if you are getting Medicaid or if you're not, a lot of these, what they call care providers, are classified as contractual workers, 1099. What does that mean? That means when they come into your home, that if something happens in your home, that the residential service provider, the agency that is providing that care, is not really responsible for anything that they may do to you or that may happen to them. And we believe that, you know, in order that they should be following the Department of Labor's independent contractors laws, and that they should be able to make their own time. They don't have to necessarily wear a uniform, and that they get certain benefits. And so there's a couple of bills, House Bill 39, House Bill 189, that looks at right now, just in the Medicaid areas, how these employees are, you know, how they're labeled and how they are considered, so that, you know, the state doesn't become responsible for those activities that happen while a residential service provider is providing care in the home. Preventing elder care, we have one bill, we've seen a couple of others. House Bill 318, Senate Bill 373 is the Safe Carrier Act. Believe it or not, you know, when you put up that little red flag on your mailbox, what's been happening a lot recently, and then when you go to a blue box, people have been stealing the mail. Imagine that. Happened in my neighborhood. They tried to cash somebody's check. In the bigger blue mailboxes, if you've used them recently, you'll see that they only open like this much so that you can just get a mail and get an envelope in there. And so this bill is prohibiting the theft, increases the penalties to 2 years in jail, $10,000 and or both. And so we're supporting that because we know that, you know, if you're an older person and you have to send your bills out, we know a lot of older people still use the check cashing process, that they put their mail. I told my elderly neighbor yesterday, I walked by her house at 5 o'clock in the morning and I saw that her little red flag was up. And I said, just put your mail out there when you know that the mail lady's coming, because she doesn't come until 4 o'clock the next day. And believe me, people that are thieves, they know when the mail lady is supposed to come, or the mailman, or whoever that person is. I also just want to briefly tell you that we are supporting, and I think Vinnie DeMarco is coming on to talk to you about the prescription drug affordability bill. House Bill 340, Senate Bill 388. He will go into details about that and how effective they think it's been thus far and why they want to expand it. We also work on tax relief. There are never enough bills on tax relief. So far, we have seen at least 2. Senate Bill 58, which is sponsored by Senator Brooks, expands eligibility for and increase the value of the senior tax credit from 150,000 joint filers to 200,000 in joint filers. And if it is a single spouse, they can also get that benefit, and it would be the heads of household from $1,750 to $2,000. I'm not a tax person. Ms. Libner didn't teach me that part of math, but I know that you can get up to $2,000 credit. There's another more extensive bill that was put in, Senate Bill 498, House Bill 369 by Senator Guile and Delegate Vogel, income tax senior tax credit alterations, allows for a state income tax credit for residents who are at least 65 years of age. And the first bill, you have to be at least 65. Both people need to be 65. And in this case, both have to be. Filing jointly or at least 65, the head of household, and have a federal adjusted gross income up to 125,000, they can get from $1,750 to $2,000 credit. So they're kind of doing the same thing. I don't know how much of a chance any of these tax credit bills have. There's a ton of them in, but with, I think Virginia said earlier, we are looking at deficits. We want to make sure that everything gets paid, and, you know, we are supporting them because we know our older citizens need a little bit of a tax break, and we want to keep them in Maryland. The other thing is, you know, we do know that, you know, when we talk about services, I am supporting the Department of Aging's budget tomorrow, and the department's secretary is developing something called a longevity initiative, where they're talking about how to provide services and resources to the aging population. And so that we're keeping a critical eye on. We also know that it's going to take funds and services as people age, because what we do know is that we have more people over the age of 65 in Maryland right now than we have children in public school. We don't want to compete with those children, but we know that those people 65 and older have some needs. They need services, transportation. They need, they need resources. They need to stay active. They don't want to be isolated. They're going to maybe need some long-term care services. And, you know, we know that one illness, you know, we have one of our volunteers that work with us. He is only 58 years old. He was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease at the age of 50. He's a retired state trooper. You know what that means? He went through his IRA. He went through his supplemental retirement. He had to sell his home, and he's now living with his son. And so we want to make sure that there are services and resources out there for people as they age. So it's pretty critical, and we hope that we all stay healthy. I wanted to talk to you we also work on utilities. And one thing that we have been working on for the last couple of years, in 1999, when Maryland deregulated its energy, its electric and gas supply side, it allowed what we call retail energy suppliers, or they're also known as third-party suppliers, to come in Maryland. We're not against choice, but what we have seen, and we have a lot of data, we have volunteers that work on this very closely. You've gotten those mailers. The people may come to your door. They may approach you in the Walmart or the Costco, and they say, we can make your energy cheaper. For residential service, for residential customers, they only offer a 3-month introductory low fee, not necessarily, it's the last one I got was only 10%. So the Maryland BG&E, Baltimore Gas and Electric rate, was like 10 cents, 10.8 cents, and they were offering, I think, 10.1 cent for 3 months. And after the 3 months, if you're not careful and review your bill and what they're charging you, it goes to a variable rate. And we have noticed that over the years, that this happens to people. They go into the variable rate because they're not paying close attention, and they pay into upwards of $1,000 more per year than if they would have stayed with their default supplier, which is known as BG&E, Pepco, Delmarva, wherever you live. And so we're trying to put some consumer protections around this industry. We also know that they've gone to some people's doors, older people specifically, and they've gotten a hold of their BGE number. They've switched them from BG&E or Pepco to whatever supplier it is. And there's probably 50 or 60 of these suppliers. So we've been working on Senate Bill 1, House Bill 267, that will put some parameters around that industry, that will licensure the door-to-door salespeople, and that and talk about some kind of caps, because right now that variable rate can go from the introductory rate, which is 10.1, to it can go to 20 cents per kilowatt hour. So we've been paying attention to this for a couple of years, and we are supporting Senator Augustine's bill and Senator Crosby, Delegate Crosby, he's from Southern Maryland. And then there's something else that is near and dear to AARP's heart. It's around what we call protecting retirement income and or making sure that you have enough. And it's the automatic deduction for state of Maryland supplemental retirement plans. The title of the bill is Senate Bill 322, Maryland Teachers and State Employees Supplemental Retirement Plans. And what this bill does is it currently, if you go into state service or you become a teacher, I don't know about you, but when I joined the state service, they had the supplemental retirement plan, but nobody told us about it. I didn't have anyone tell me about it until I worked for the state for almost 10 years. At that point, I lost, I think it was five or 6 years, the state would pay up to $600 additional. If you put in $600, you would get $600, but no one told me about it. So I didn't realize you had to opt in to the supplemental retirement. And what the state supplemental retirement plan is trying to do is to make it a default so that you would have to actually opt out. But we're hoping that if you go into state service, or if your children or grandchildren go into state service or they become teachers, that they learn more about the importance of that supplemental retirement. It's part of the three-legged stool. You have Social Security, you have your pension, and my God, us as state employees and teachers, we're so lucky to have a pension. And then the supplemental retirement is that third leg. And we all know that we need that. So we will be supporting Senate Bill 322 to make it a default to opt out versus they have to opt in. And then along with Virginia, we'll offer testimony to make sure that the state teachers and employees retirement system is well funded and secure for today, tomorrow, and the next day. So those are a few of the bills that we've been working on, and we have been very busy. I think it's 18 days, just to give you a little bit of, there've already been 541 Senate bills introduced and 722 House bills, for a total of 1,263 bills have been introduced. So we've been looking at all of those and trying to make sure that AARP is well represented at the legislature during this very busy 90-day session. So thank you.
Thank you, Tammy. We have maybe 5 minutes that we could have some questions. And I see Virginia has her hand up already. So Virginia, you're on.
I want to say how excellent the work is that Tammy does. The organization is phenomenal, and in fact, a high standard for the other states throughout the country, what AARP Maryland does. And I know that they're looking right now at about 200 bills.
Yeah.
And whether to support them or not. Now, Tammy, I've heard words from her that had retirement in them. And I can't believe that that's even a possibility, so I'm going to ignore that. But she not only is excellent to work with, but AARP has supported us in a lot of different ways, such as events in Annapolis with leadership, the governor, the leadership of the Senate and the House. And these programs have been very beneficial to our understanding of what's going on. So I want to say thank you, and you do excellent work.
And yes, I am retiring in December and going to play a lot of golf and a lot of pickleball. So this will probably be my last briefing before MRSPA. And it has been a journey, one that I've very much enjoyed. You know, my public school background has been very important to me. I think it has gotten me where I am today. So I want to thank all of you for doing that. And thank you for having me today.
Well, thank you for being with us today. We certainly appreciate your joining us at these sessions, and we are going to miss you, Tammy. Happy retirement.
Thank you.
It's wonderful, but you will be missed, certainly.
Thank you.
Very much. Our next speaker is going to give us an overview of the Maryland budget. Her name is Tonya Zimmerman. She is the manager of the operating budget, the Maryland Department of Legislative Services. This is her third session as a manager in this department and her 17th year with the department. Tonya received a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology from Albion College, a Master of Arts in Urban Studies from Temple University, and a PhD in Public Policy from the University of Maryland in Baltimore County. Tonya, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen with my presentation here. So this is just going to be kind of a quick overview of some of the kind of main points about the governor's budget. Overall, the fiscal 2025 budget decreases by $1.1 billion, about 1.7%. There's a decrease in general fund spending of about 1.6 billion, but about 1 billion of that was due to one-time transfers of funds, 900 million of which was to the Blueprint Fund, and 100 million was to the Transportation Trust Fund. There is a special fund increase of which 315 million is related to spending from the Blueprint. The governor's spending plan leaves a general fund balance of about $103 million at the end of fiscal 2025. The revenue stabilization account, more commonly known as the rainy day fund, would end fiscal 2025 with a balance of $2.3 billion, which is about 9.4% of general fund revenue. There is what's called a structural shortfall. So the ongoing spending is exceeding the ongoing revenue by about $495 million. That is a little bit lower than what was the goal that was set by the Spending Affordability Committee for the budget introduction. The administration's budget plan includes revenue and spending adjustments that would have a combined impact of nearly $1 billion that are contingent on legislation, which are, I think I'm having a little bit of trouble on, can you guys see the screen? See the presentation? Is it showing?
The presentation went away. It looks like it's you again.
Yeah, let me unshare and see if I can get that back up. Sorry about the technical difficulties.
No worries. We were all teachers at one time who had a snafu of one sort or another in a classroom, so we get it.
Okay, I think I can get this back up now. All right.
There we go.
So there, like I said, there's a combined impact of about $1 billion contingent on legislation. So that there's about $106 million of revenue adjustments. Some of these include changing the commissions that lottery agents received and redirecting some special fund interest to the general fund. There's about $245 million related to transfers from various funds to the general fund. The largest of these are from the dedicated purpose account, where funding is set aside for particular purposes. The largest component of that is related to cybersecurity. There would still be nearly $100 million remaining for that purpose. And then there are several kind of smaller transfers that would occur. There's about $677 million of reductions that are contingent on legislation. Most of these are contingent on the Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act. Some of them, however, are related to separate legislation, such as fee increases, billed to increase fees in the Maryland Department of the Environment, and other legislation. About $496 million of that is just to eliminate the requirement to appropriate some fiscal 2023 surplus to the rainy day fund, and about $50 million is related to some related to reducing some surplus that is dedicated to some retirement liabilities. The other large reductions related to that are to modify the Selinger formula, which supports private institutions of higher education by nearly $64 million based on a change in who is counted in the enrollment, and about $22.6 million related to a series of changes in the community college formula, including changing the percentage of the state funding per full-time equivalent student at the public 4 years, along with some other changes. And then there's about $45 million of other kind of changes throughout the budget. There's an additional $33 million nearly of additional spending in the budget that's contingent on legislation enacting those programs. The largest of these is related to the Governor's Enough Act and a Center for Firearm Violence Prevention and Intervention that would be created in the Department of Health. The administration's budget plan anticipates a structural deficit that would continue to grow over time, reaching $3.45 billion. The Department of Legislative Services has slightly lower estimated costs for education and Medicaid in the out years, so that the department has a slightly lower shortfall, but it would still reach $2.9 billion in fiscal 2029. In December, the Department of Legislative Services estimated the state would have a cash shortfall of $1.1 billion, leaving 10% of general fund revenues for the rainy day fund balance. And this kind of following page here highlights kind of how the governor eliminated that cash shortfall. So some of these were what I discussed previously with the transfers and revenue. It leaves a smaller rainy day fund balance, which is about $200 million. And then there were some budget reductions of about $627 million compared to what DLS had forecast at that time. The largest of these is shifting some of the capital spending that was included in the would have been expected to be included in the operating budget into a kind of bond funding for those programs. In addition, some of those legislative actions that I mentioned, the Medicaid spending trends have lowered the estimated cost as well, along with some other areas of lower spending. This is somewhat offset by initiatives and enhancements in the budget, including those that are contingent on legislation that I mentioned earlier, as well as some others I'll get to in just a moment, as well as some kind of overall higher agency operations. This page here highlights what those additional discretionary enhancements were. They total about $389 million and do include the legislation that I noted. The largest component of this is operating support for the WMATA system. There's also about $125 million of higher employee compensation beyond what was we had forecast. And there's an additional $25 million for higher education security grants, $12 million for the Department of Juvenile Services for enhanced services, and $10 million to build provider capacity to reduce, as part of efforts to reduce wait lists in a variety of the Medicaid waiver programs. Some other key features is that there is a increase in the K-12 education funding of about $450 million. Most healthcare providers receive a rate increase of about 3%. There's almost $488 million additional between fiscal 2024 and 2025 for the Child Care Scholarship Program. This is to assist with shortfalls that occurred in fiscal 2023, as well as anticipated shortfalls in 2024, and to adequately fund the program in 2025. Programmatic changes over the last few years have led to an increase in the participation and cost for the program. I'm going to kind of skip through some of these, but the last bullet here on this page shows that there's about $453.5 million of general obligation bonds and cash for school facility needs. And then there's also some additional support through the Build to Learn revenue bonds. So this particular chart here shows information, and it does kind of relate to the overall structural shortfall as well. But what it's showing here is how some of the blueprint costs are being funded over the next year, and the impact there as a result on the general fund. So the blue bars represent the kind of ongoing funding, ongoing revenue, which increase a little over the course of time. The yellow bars represent fund balance from the blueprint that are supporting some of the costs through fiscal 2027. In fiscal 2027, DLS is projecting that the fund balance would not be, or the governor's budget plan assumes that there would be no longer sufficient balance to cover all of the costs. And so there would begin to be more general funds required to support those costs. And because there is no longer balance, that amount increases to $2 billion in fiscal 2028, and then $2.6 billion in fiscal 2029. This may be a little bit small to see, but this information is on the Department of Legislative Services website. Under the budget tab, there's a section for state aid, and it provides information on the various kind of state aid programs, including the various components of the support for the K-12 education and other kind of blueprint initiatives. It provides it kind of at a summary level, and also information for the different counties. This shows that it increases by about $262 million. I mentioned a $449 million number earlier. There's also about $188 million that is related to the state share of the teacher retirement costs that are increasing. And then this last kind of page here kind of discusses why those the state share of the retirement costs are increasing. It's increasing across kind of all the state retirement plans, and this is related to a couple different factors, including the investment returns that were below the assumed rate of return, payroll growth, and cost of living adjustments for retirees. There are some that have uncapped COLAs that have been higher. So that is all the information I had, but I can answer some questions if you have some.
Okay, thank you very much, Tonya. Are there any questions? Let me see if I see any hands up.
I don't see any hands.
I don't see any hands up either. Oh, there's a hand. Shirley.
Jess would like to have a copy of her presentation if that's possible.
I can send it along so that it can be passed out. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for such a comprehensive review of the budget. And if there are no other questions.
Carla, could I ask, I don't know if she knows this, but I do have a question. I'm sorry I didn't raise my hand. It's Wanda.
Yes.
Tonya, do you have a sense of how we're in the deficit situation, or the income taxes and property taxes and so forth, or the taxes or the federal government not sending as much as expected, or do you have a sense of why the revenues are lower than than projected?
So I might defer to someone else in my department who is unfortunately not on this call about the kind of specifics. Over the last few years, I would say generally that the federal government had provided quite a lot of support during the pandemic. Most of that is kind of ending over time, and there have been some changes to the revenue estimates that are impacting the surplus as well, or the kind of structural kind of look. And then there are kind of higher caseloads in programs like Medicaid during the pandemic. There were requirements to kind of maintain eligibility for people. So those caseloads are higher. The federal government had provided support to assist with some of those costs over during the course of the pandemic, which have phased out. So there are more of those costs that are state costs as well. So in terms of the kind of specifics of the revenue, I would have to provide kind of additional information after, but there have been kind of reductions or changes to their revenue estimates that are impacting the outlook.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? See any other yellow hands up? Okay, if there are no other questions, Tammy, I want to thank you for taking time to join us today and sharing the information with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And now, as we look at our agenda, it is time to call back Tammy Bresnahan's teacher and our legislative aide, Virginia Crespo.
Isn't it just a little odd when your students retire?
Yes.
Oh, well, I guess we should be getting used to it. Thank you. I mentioned earlier in the meeting that our priorities. And I just wanted to add to this that after you look them over, if you think that there are some, if you have some concerns or additions or changes, please let us know. We do that in August, but let us know whenever you want. Also, the meetings the committee has are, of course, open meetings, so anybody can sign on if you wish to. The way that we do things, how we do things, as you know, we review the bills, and Tammy told you there's a lot of them, and they're coming in, they're still coming in hot and heavy for at least another week or so. Then look at the bills that we feel that might come under our priorities. And as a committee, we discuss those bills and to decide whether what kind of position we want to take. That could be support or oppose, with written testimony or with oral testimony, or both. We may decide to monitor the bills or take no position. Then the update that is we come up with it every week is put on the website, and you can access it there. The topics this year, so far, we're looking at about 28, 30 bills. that we are taking a position on. We also participate, well, among those bills this year, the blueprint has taken center stage. But in meetings and events with the governor present and speaking, and the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate, and other legislators, all keep saying, we support the blueprint. We want to see the blueprint be successful. And as Dr. Kirwan suggested, the previous governor was not fully supportive, but the legislature was. They overrode his vetoes and they made sure that things were funded and moving ahead. So I believe, so that is what's going on. There aren't any particular bills right now. It's a budget issue primarily, as you have heard. And of course, as our pensions, I think, as I said, are in good shape. The bills that we're looking at right now, there are some that deal with taxes. Tammy mentioned the caregiver tax credit. There's a long-term care tax credit. I don't know if any of you remember how many years it took to get a bill passed to require trucks to cover their load, but it was 25 years. So I always think of that when I think about long-term tax credits, because it's something that keeps coming back year and year and not getting passed. We are still working to get that done. There's another bill that's going to establish a study committee of long-term care. That's a much larger thing, not just the tax credit, but long-term care, which of course is an important issue to all of us. And there are, as was mentioned, some bills to provide tax credit for seniors that we're supporting. The last year, there were a lot of bills on curriculum. This year, I think they figured out that the legislature is not the place to go to establish curriculum. There are only a couple, and they're taking a different approach than making mandates. And the election bills that we've been seeing the last couple of years have also gone down to just a couple of them that we're looking at this year. We, as a group, as an association, we also participate a lot with others. AARP, I attend their meetings every Friday. That's why I know that it's such an excellent group. They do such good work. And they also support a lot of activities that we're able to participate in. We also have membership on the Oversight Committee for Nursing Homes and Long-Term Care that helps to inform our decisions in regards to that. And the National Retired Teachers Association, which of course is the parent company of MRSPA, and AARP. I think that gives a pretty good idea of how we work. And certainly if you have any questions, I'm open to them. But I would like, I hope that he's here. Oh, there, I see him. Yes, one of the bills that, one of the concerns is healthcare and prescription drug costs. They are clearly a significant issue. And for several years, our organization has supported bills that try to rein in prescription drug costs, with the result of creating the first in the nation Prescription Drug Affordability Board. Again, we ran into problems with getting it up and started, but it is starting now, it's working, but it is, as written in the law, it applies to drugs that are provided by the state and local governments, which, by the way, does not include us because our healthcare is not funded. We are not part of the state healthcare system. Our healthcare, as you know, is provided by the local subdivisions. But I have invited Vincent DeMarco, who is the president of Healthcare for All and very active in getting things done in Annapolis. And I would like to turn this over to him because he will do a very good job of telling us what it's about and what we can do. Vinny.
Hi, thank you, Virginia, and thanks for inviting me to this wonderful group. You are very, very fortunate to be represented by Virginia in our coalition. She's been coming to our meetings and doing a great job. And I'm thrilled to see my old friend Tom Slater there. I say, oh, because we've known each other for decades. And he is one of my all-time heroes and knows more about presidents than anybody else I know. So thank you for having me, and thanks for all you do on so many issues. I know you had AARP on earlier. Tammy Bresnaham is a great leader, and they do so much. And we're working closely with them on the prescription drug issue. I don't need to tell all of you that high-cost drugs are a big, big problem. Drugs don't work if people can't afford them. We know so many people, 45% of Marylanders, according to the poll we took, have trouble with their drugs, have trouble affording the drugs they need, or have to make hard decisions with other necessities of life because of the high cost of drugs. And even those of us who have full coverage are hurt because insurers have to pay a lot because the drug corporations gouge them. Care First Blue Cross Blue Shield says that 1/3 of their healthcare costs, of their premium costs, is because of a high cost drugs. It really is unconscionable. The drug corporations say they need this money for research. Well, we have a study Public Citizen put out showing that in 1 year they spent $22 billion more on profits, advertising, stock dividends, and things like that than research. And there's a new report that they spent $500,000 recently, a contribution to an election denying right-wing group. So they don't need additional money for research. They have it in what they waste money on, but they want to charge these high prices that really hurt people. So that's why we're thrilled that President Joe Biden enacted the Inflation Reduction Act, which, as you know, puts a cap on what people on Medicare pay for high-cost drugs and allows Medicare to negotiate with the drug corporations. That's great. But for those of us not on Medicare, we need the Prescription Drug Affordability Board. The Prescription Drug Affordability Board in Maryland was enacted in 2019, and thanks for you all for your support, the first in the nation. And I can't emphasize enough, it was the first time in American history that a state legislature stood up to Big Pharma and defeated them with something like this PDAB law. And several other states have followed our lead. 3 of them, Colorado, Minnesota, and Washington, have enacted PDAB laws with full authority to make high-cost drugs more affordable for everyone. Our law, as Virginia said, is more limited right now. It makes high-cost drugs more affordable for state and local governments, and the board is about to implement that. However, we need them to have the full authority that Colorado, Minnesota, and Washington have to make high-cost drugs more affordable for everyone. So we're thrilled that Delegate Bonnie Cullison and Delegate Jen White-Holland and Delegate Senator Dawn Guile and Senator Brian Feldman have put in legislation, and Senate Bill 388 and House Bill 340, Senate Bill 388 and House Bill 340, which would expand the board's authority to be able to make high-cost drugs more affordable. So we would love you all to come testify in favor of this legislation. And the 2 dates are February 7th in the Senate Finance Committee, and Senate Bill 388. And if you could authorize Virginia to testify and we'd get her on one of our panels, that would be great. And that morning at 11:30, we're gathering at St. Anne's Church. We work very closely with the Episcopal Diocese. St. Anne's Church, which, as you know, is right next to the Capitol. We're gathering there at 11:30 and going out and talking with legislators. And we're going to provide boxed lunches for people. So if you all want to come, that'd be great. And then on the 8th, there's a hearing before the House Health and Government Operations Committee at 1 o'clock on House Bill 340. So next week is the really big time to make some progress here. So to recap, and Virginia has our email that explains all this, which she could get to all of you. And if any of you want to come on the 7th, we ask that you register ahead of time so we know how many lunches to get and can set you up with your legislature. And we'd love to have Virginia testify before the 2 committees on your behalf. Now, I could actually absolutely talk about any of this for hours, but I won't. But I'm happy to answer your questions either on the substance of the bills or on what's happening next week. Is that, Virginia, need me to say anything else? Or
Yes,
okay.
I wanted you to talk about the request for personal stories.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very, very much. Very, very important that people tell us their personal stories of how high-cost drugs are hurting you. We will have people testifying before both committees that will tell how high-cost drugs, one gentleman's getting, he lost his house because his drugs were so expensive, his Parkinson's drugs. It was very, very sad. And he is a big supporter of this legislation, Larry Zarzecki, and others will do the same. So if someone wants to testify at one of the committees with a personal story of how high-cost drugs have hurt you and why we need this legislation, please let me know. Virginia can give you my email and everything, and we can get you signed up. Or to just tell us your story so we can pass it on to the board. Because if you have a story, we want you to tell your legislators so they know that they got to pass this law, but also tell the board so they know what are the drugs that are hurting people, where they need to put upper payment limits on what people pay for their high-cost drugs. So we'd love for you to contact your legislator and tell them that they need to pass this legislation, tell them about how high-cost drugs are hurting you, and if you want, come to the hearings and testify about it. Yes, sir. Harold? I think you're muted, sir.
Am I dreaming, or is there a new game in town called Drug Shortage?
Well, there are some drugs that are less available than others. I understand that. The statute specifically says that in setting upper payment limits, the board has to take that into account. The goal of the board is to make high-cost drugs affordable and available. So where that's a problem, they will take that into account. But I'm glad you raised that.
Because the reason I'm asking this is because my daughter is having trouble getting some drugs for her son.
Okay. The Prescription Drug Affordability Board's goal is to help everyone, but they also, Andy York, who's the head of it, can give you specific advice, and he's done that for people. So if you reach out to me, and Virginia can give you my email, I'll connect you with Andy, and he could see if there's any way he could be of help.
Okay.
Just send me an email.
Appreciate it.
Anybody else?
Anybody else have a question for Vinny?
I just want to say thank you to Vinny for coming over, and he is an excellent activist leader. Thank you.
Thank you, Virginia. I'll be in touch with you about testifying and everything.
Okay, all right.
Have a great day.
He's even had a book written about him, the DeMarco method. All about how he achieves all of his great success. My hero, Vinny DeMarco.
Thank you, Tom. You're a sweetheart. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye, Vinny. Thank you. Okay, Virginia, do you have anything? We're about 5 minutes ahead of time right now. Do you have anything you'd like to share?
Let me look at all my different notes here. We are going to meet after this meeting. The committee will meet to discuss some bills that have come up recently. I think that I have covered what I wanted to cover, and I will put Vinny's email address in the chat group.
And since we do have a little bit of time, I want to share my screen, or try to. And I think this might work. Okay. What I wanted to share with you, because you all are attending today because you are interested in legislation and what MRSPA is doing for you as far as legislation is concerned. And so I'd like you to join in keeping up to date on what is happening. And I know it's one thing for me to say, go to the MRSPA website and look at, but I'd like to show you just how easy it is. If you go to the MRSPA website and go to legislation, there are two things I particularly want to share with you. One is the legislative updates. And why aren't we getting legislative updates? Oh, here we go. And the last one is the final one last year, but this is what you will see, something like this, only it will have the current bills that we are following. And it's very easy because it tells you what the bill is. And by just clicking there, you are taken to the wording of the bill. You can follow all the way through to see what letters have been sent by MRSPA. If a letter has been sent, you can actually see the text of the letter. And it's a wonderful way to keep up to date with things. The other thing I wanted to share with you there is it is important to take action. Now, Vinny and other people have talked about testifying, etc. But there are many times when you can take action, maybe not by going to Annapolis to testify, but by going to the membership and sending in your information, how you feel about different things, actually taking action. These are wonderful things to click on and to give you more information. So now you have no excuses about how to find it. It is listed under legislation on the Maryland Retired School Personnel website on their opening page. So I really want to encourage you all to do that. Okay. Are there any questions about that? Okay, if there are no other questions, I'd like to take a minute just to thank all of the presenters, if they are still on. We really appreciate your giving of your time this morning. And I want to thank all the MRSPA members who joined with us today, who asked questions, who participated. And as Virginia said, remember, the committee is meeting at 1 o'clock, so we have time to go grab lunch or whatever, and we'll be back to work for you all.